Welcome to the Aiki Dojo Podcast. I am David Ito, Chief Instructor of the Aikido Center of Los Angeles, and we have a special guest, Mike Gallo Sensei from Aikido San Marcos. Thank you for coming.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Well, yeah, I guess it's not really coming since it's your dojo. So this podcast is filmed in front of a live audience, small live audience. So, Sensei, what year did you start Aikido?
So I started Aikido in 1987 with Kazuo Cheba Sensei. He was working out of a little hallway dojo on University Avenue. And it was busy because the hookers would go up and down in front of the dojo while we were practicing. So it was, and his number one student at the time was Gerald Gimmel Sensei, who was a CID investigator for the Marine Corps, and he had started a satellite up in Oceanside, and so I was training there and also down at the University Avenue.
Did you have any prior martial arts training before you started with Chiba Sensei?
Yes, I started in martial arts at 16 years of age with Oshima Sensei. He was the last direct student of Jitchen Funakoshi, a Shotokan dojos in Santa Monica, Ventura. I believe he had one also in Santa Barbara, and that was in mid-60s. And then towards the late 60s, I changed from that dojo to training with Ed Parker Sensei. He had his Pasadena dojo at the time, and Ed Parker was the highest ranked black belt in the United States at the time. He was considered an 8th Dan.
In his own system, or a different system?
In Kenpo, but in total, I at that time, it was very rare. You have to remember, it was very rare for anybody to be above 3rd Dan, in any art. There may have been some judo people that were 6th Dan, but it was unusual.
Yeah, because how old must he have been at that time to be 8th Dan?
I think it was in his mid 40s, and so I trained with him in the Santa Monica dojo, and did some privates with him there. I clearly remember my first private class with him is he decided he was going to remodel his office, so he had all these soji screens. So he said, "Here, you break those." So my private class for that day was breaking all these soji screens into kindling, and kind of an odd way to teach a student, but I guess he accomplished two things, right? And then my direct training instructor with him was Tom Kelly. Tom Kelly went on to be popular as a referee in the initial kickboxing days. And so Tom one afternoon said, "Hey, Sensei said I could invite you. We're going to go over to Pasadena and watch him train with Bruce Lee." So we went. Yeah. So I went up with Tom Kelly up to Pasadena, and a private session where Ed Parker was basically sparring with Bruce Lee.
What was that like?
It was interesting because most people don't know. They see the movie Enter the Dragon and see how buff Bruce Lee was, but he was a little man. He was like 135 pounds soaking wet. And Ed Parker was, big. He's a Hawaiian. He was good 200 and some pounds, 6'1". So it was quite a variation in stature and size. But what struck me as unusual was that I actually thought Ed Parker was faster than him, and he was fast. So
really,
yeah, it was quite impressive. So that was just a piece of history that I was lucky enough to view.
Was it a friendly spar or was it a rigorous spar? Was it kumite?
No, it was more friendly. I think Bruce Lee was kind of ironing out a lot of his Jeet Kune Do. This was during the time that, it was a few years after he had done the television show. He was Kato in The Green Hornet. And so he was kind of playing off of that. And this was before the TV show Kung Fu, if you remember those days with David Carradine. he scripted it and was supposed to get the job, and they cut him out of it, which was kind of a rotten deal for Bruce Lee. But obviously he made plenty of money in movies. So, but that was in that interim period, and it was quite interesting to watch him work out.
What made you transition from Kempo to Aikido?
So there was a period, probably almost 20 years, no, not quite that, probably a good 15 years, where I was a dojo rat. I would just go to dojos and practice kumite, and I didn't care about rank, I didn't care about any of that. I was just, enjoying my karate training. And then one day, someone mentioned to me that there was this Aikido, and I had seen Aikido. I was talking about this earlier. I had seen Aikido once before in my life when I was probably about 12 years of age. I was at an Oban festival at the West Los Angeles Buddhist Center, Cultural Center, and someone demonstrated, and I think it was Ron Kobayashi. I believe that's who it was demonstrating at the time. And he was, a student of Koichi Tohei. And that had to be probably early, mid-'60s. And so that I'd seen it before, but I never got a chance. So someone told me, well, there's this rec dojo up in Oceanside where you can train, and that was with Cheba Sensei. And so the year after I came in, Steven Seagal in '88 did his movie Above the Law. So that kind of reinforced it, right? Because we were all probably already in it or excited about that. So.
No, I started in '90. So as you transitioned into Aikido, did you continue to do karate?
No. So I had a little gym in my garage with a heavy bag, and that practiced that and taught my daughter. She got all the way to red belt in Tang Sudo, and she was I want to say she was like 14, and her sensei here in town was Laura Gomez. I think she's still around. And so one day I took her there. She was going to test for her next belt. And I said, come on, we're going to go. You're going to get your next belt? And she goes, I'm not going. I said, what do you mean you're not going? I was a single dad, by the way. So I'm raising this little girl. And it's like, what do you mean you're not going? And she's like, I'm not going. I've had enough. She said, if you like it, you go. So I thought, okay, well, I'll start training. So then I started in Aikido.
How funny. Because so then, when did you start doing Daito-ryu?
So once I had started Aikido, I was training out of the Oceanside Rec Center, and there was 2 clubs there offering Aikido. It was Gallo Sensei, who was offering Kazo Chiba, and then I'd go down at least once or twice a week down to Cheba Sensei's dojo on University. And then there was another group at the time run by Lynn Karsten. She was a Nidon under Fumio Toyota Sensei. So half of the week I'd practice hard style Aikido. Second half of the week I'd practice soft style Aikido. So I was constantly being corrected. It's too hard, it's too soft. It sounded like bedroom talk. So I'm back and forth with a variety of different. So it was interesting learning that way because I had to adapt because the Aikido was different.
Did Chiba Sensei, was he okay with you doing that?
He didn't know.
Oh.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't seem like he'd be the type to...
Oh, no. I remember one day distinctly coming to a morning Saturday class, and he came in and he brought his car keys and he threw them on the mat and he said, that's key. And I do Aikido. So it was so, yeah.
So how many years were you with Chiba?
Well, I went all the way to my second Q rank, first or second Q. I can't remember at the moment, but either or. And then I decided I was going to just focus because, it's biblical. You can't serve 2 masters, right? So here I go. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to have to pick a sensei. And they tell you that. So for the audience here, if you're beginning or intermediate, the most important decision you can make is you got to pick a sensei, and then you have to follow them. You have to commit to whatever they teach you as the art.
that is a very hard concept for modern students today, because as the new modern student says, variety is the spice of life. The traditional teacher goes, there's only one spice.
That's it. And we talked about this earlier, that the in Kodo, Furia Sensei's book, he talks about in the ancient ways, one of the articles was throw out the new and bring in the old. So bring back tradition, and there's so much to be said for traditional martial arts over, MMA or what I call sport martial arts, because they are sport. And I digress though from the Daito-ryu. So with that group, I was introduced to B.J. Carlisle, who had a dojo down in Encinitas, Leucadia area, and in 88 or early 89, I saw a seminar by Don Jir, and that is Yanagiru Aiki Jiu-Jitsu. And so I was completely fascinated. I saw this gentleman in full garb. I mean, he was wearing full kimono, do live blade takeaways, and that mystified me. So I was like, I got to learn this. So,
how long were you with Don Jir?
So I studied with his number one student, who lives here in San Diego, North County, John Clodig.
Does he still teach?
I don't believe so. I think he's in retirement, but I was over 6 years with him directly. He taught once a week in this dojo, and also I did privates once a week, Saturday afternoon. So I was spending on Saturdays sometimes 2, 3, 4 hours doing privates with him, and then his regular class Wednesday nights. And so I progressed in that, and then started making contacts with other people in the Aiki Jiu-Jitsu sphere around the world, and connected with several different clubs. So that's the genesis of my Daito-ryu training.
When did you gravitate back to Aikido?
Well, I was doing all of this at the same time.
So
I was training five days a week at least, sometimes 6 days a week.
But you were training at Cheba Sensei's dojo, Lin's dojo, and Don Jir's dojo at the same time?
Well, so Oceanside Aikikai had 2 clubs training there. One was a Key Society club, one was Chiba's club. And then on the weekends, I was training at up at Clodig Sensei's dojo. And then I'd opened my own dojo in 93. So we opened this up in 93, and we've been in continual existence here in the same location since 93. So we're on our, if I did my math, 32 years.
How old were you when you started this dojo?
Let's see. I was probably 40s, early 40s.
Did you have Cheba Sensei's blessing?
Yes, I did. In fact, so I had a business partner that we opened together here, and he had many years of training in Aikido. He had started as a teenager down at MCRD with B.J. Carlisle, and his name was Paul Morris, and a great guy. And so we opened a dojo, and he had higher rank than me, so he was dojo cho for the first 3 years, and then he retired.
And then you sailed a ship on your own?
Yes, and you know what that's like.
What rank were you when that happened?
I was a Nidon when I took over the dojo here.
So what was that hill like?
Well, running a dojo is interesting because there's a few in the room who are doing it, so they know. Aikido is not a big revenue stream. At the time, it was fortunate because this coincided with Steven Seagal's rise to fame. So he did a lot of advertising for all of us, right? People actually started to realize what Aikido was. So if they came in the door and asked, what is Aikido? I'd say, well, first comeback was, well, have you seen a Steven Seagal movie? And they would go, oh, yeah, well, that's him. So that's the art.
So then you're teaching at Nidon, and what rank were you in Daito-ryu at the time?
I was not even a Shodan initially, and then started testing, and then was graduated by time in.
Did you attain rank with Don Jir Sensei?
No. Oh, yes, I did. Through Clothing Sensei, I did attain rank. So
What rank
I
is
have that fifth Dan.
Fifth
I
Dan.
have that.
So did Don Jir care that you trained in other Aikido arts?
He welcomed me to his dojo. His dojo was in Long Beach, so you can imagine the commute. No, so that wasn't possible. That's why he actually recommended that I train with Clothing Sensei.
But he didn't mind you mixing styles?
No, not at all.
And all the while, Chiba Sensei is none the wiser?
Pretty much.
You don't think you ever caught wind of it? Well, I mean...
I wasn't a top-ranked student. I mean, I was a Q-ranked student during most of my training with him, so... Although I always kept a good relationship, I should mention that my business partner here in this dojo, Paul Morris, was part owner of Fisherman's Landing, and guess what Chiba Sensei's favorite thing to do was?
He likes to fish.
He loved to go fishing. So
all those dudes.
My partner would constantly comp him, and so we were often invited to his private dinners with literally just him, his wife, maybe his son or his daughter, and Coral Crane, and that was it. It was a private dinner. And then he'd bring, after a little bit, he loved French wine, so after Chiba Sensei would have a few glasses of French wine, he'd loosen up, and he'd bring out his Suba collection, because he had quite a Suba collection. So
that's what I hear. Other teachers have talked about that same, with like Didier Boyette Shihan talked about, Chiba's favorite pastime is breaking out his Suba collection.
That was it, and yeah. And so... And it was interesting because when they moved to Fremont, they took over and I remember going down and helping them do some of the build out. It was previously a carpenter's union hall. Now I think they transitioned it, the city bought it back and transitioned into a police substation. But yeah, and so he lived upstairs with his family, upstairs.
Oh, I didn't know that. He lived up on top of the dojo?
He lived at the dojo, yes. Much like Furuya Shihan.
Yeah, I don't know if... Furuya Sensei living on top of the dojo was much living as it is.
But he did live in the dojo, didn't he?
Yeah, he slept in a recliner. So I don't know how.
Really?
I mean, I wouldn't call it living, but maybe he lived it. But I mean, Chiba Sensei's house on top of the dojo was like a full residence.
No, I think it was an accommodated. You've been to Japan, you know that they have a different perception of space, right?
Yeah, they live in much smaller dwellings in Japan.
Yes.
But they also don't hang out there.
No.
So they're not like living there, and the whole family's hanging out, watching TV.
Exactly.
They leave and they come back.
And they don't entertain there. As you know, when you go to visit, they'll meet you at a restaurant. So, yes, they accommodate their living style because of the lack of space.
So, how would you describe your relationship with Chiba Sensei?
Well, it was very good. I remember with Toyota Sensei, I shifted to Toyota Sensei, and that was in early 90s. And then when Toyota would come here to do seminars, he'd say, well, I'm going down to see Chiba Sensei. I want to see if he'll put me up for my next rank. And he'd say, but he made something really clear to me. He said, don't piss off those guys up in North County, because that's my fishing ticket.
So then what year was it that you moved to Toyota Sensei?
Well, I was always with that club at the same time. So I just made that decision in whatever it was, early 90s. I decided, I can't serve two masters, so I decided I'm going to just focus on that, and this dojo became AAA. And so before me and Paul committed to make this dojo a AAA dojo, Aikido Association of America, I asked Toyota Sensei, because he was an independent at the time, and I asked him specifically, I said, I want to, if I'm going to start getting ranked, I want to be ranked Aikikai. And so he said, well, that's in the works. That was his comment to me. So...
At the time, was he divorced from Aikikai?
Well,
I don't remember the dates of when and where these people are in or out of Aikido.
So I'm not, and if I'm a little fuzzy on dates, please forgive me because we're going back 30 some years, almost 40 some years. So I might be a little fuzzy on dates. But Toyota Shihan's history was he was trained from the age of 10 in Aikikai Hanbu Dojo. His sensei was Kishimaru Ueshiba, second Doshu. And he stayed there throughout his young adulthood. And at that time, Tohei Sensei was Dojo Cho of Hanbu Dojo. So, and he ended up being his right-hand man. So when O-sensei, shortly after when O-sensei died, there was this transitionary period where Kishimaru Ueshiba, who was basically an economics professor at Meiji University, he decided that it was time for him to step up and take control of the dojo. And so then there was that split. And he made it clear to Tohei Sensei when he left, he said, make sure that whatever you call your art, you don't call it Aikido. So he said, no problem. So he called it Shinshin Tohitsu Aikido.
So then for that
and so
period of time, you were then transferred to a Ki Society dojo. Shinshin Tohitsu.
Yeah. Oh, we're talking about Toyota Sensei now. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And he received he was fifth dan, and he received his Rokudan from Tohei as Ki Society. And he was issuing, Brandon Ishisaka Sensei's here nodding because he knows that he was issuing certificates. He got in trouble for issuing certificates. Are you interested in that? That's an interesting story.
Whatever you want to share is up to you.
Okay, well.
As long as it didn't come out of my mouth.
So Toyota Shihan was issuing certificates with the Ueshiba name and using a Ueshiba chop.
Oh, was he at the time?
Yeah, and so basically you know what this is, right?
I don't know, fraud?
Forgery. But, so when current Doshu, Muratoru Sensei found this out, he was livid. So Toyota Sensei confided in me that it cost him a considerable amount of money to get reinstated. And I won't mention the amount, but he told me in confidence. And so that he did get reinstated. And then I received the very first Dan rank from Toyota Sensei that came directly from Aikikai Hanbu. And that was in 92.
What rank was that?
Shodan. That was my Shodan.
Wow, so your timetable kind of overlaps ours. I think Ken is 90 with his black belt. Mine's 93. How interesting that these other lives, what they call it, sondering, these other lives are going on at the same time as your life is going on. So you've surveyed, at this point in your life, you've surveyed Aikido. You have Aikikai, you have Toyota Sensei, you have Ki Society, you have Don Jir, Daito-ryu. So what's your preferred style of Aikido?
That's really tough to say because I think there are strong points to both. I used to say that Chiba Sensei's art would work no matter what because it would be physical. One might even say more like combat. But training with really high-level Ki Society people like Walter Muriaz and realizing, Jim Friesen, people like that, realizing how smooth Ki Society is and non-resistant.
Effective?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Anybody who's ever taken ukeme from Muriaz Sensei knew it was very effective. I used to say when he'd throw me in Rimi Nagi, and I was learning myself the matsoka fall at the time for that move, and so I used to tell people I could feel the concrete under the mat because he was a big man. He was physically big. He was 6-something and probably 210 pounds, so strong, big guy.
So how does all those different styles inform your style of Aikido today?
Okay, so as we talked about earlier, we're supposed to pick a sensei and stick with them,
Right?
right? And I used that as my direction to other future students. But I was truthfully the whore of Aikido. I would go to any seminar that had any Shihan. I trained with just about every Shihan from Japan there was that was a first generation direct student. And you can look at the list that's on my webpage. But I loved going to train with Satumi Sensei, Kanai, Shibata, you name them. I mean, whenever they had seminars, I was one of those dojo rats.
Who was your favorite person to take a class from?
I would say probably Satome, and for many reasons. Him and Nishio Sensei, because they offered a perspective beyond the physical. Satome was often said that he was the only one who actually paid attention when Sensei would go off on these esoteric rants. He would just go off on, talking about the kame and most of the other guys they weren't even paying attention. Chiba Sensei and those guys they were more interested in just getting at it, So.
But what about Satumi Sensei's style you liked?
It was powerful. It was very directed towards the sword. If you look at some of his first publications, he actually used the sword in his movement. So the sword obviously fascinated me. That's why I gravitated towards the Daito-ryu. I know Sensei made it clear that all our art is around and about the sword, as you were demonstrating today. It's about the movement.
So modern people don't always study the sword or have any sword background. Do you think that a modern person should complement or begin their study of Aikido with the sword?
No, but I think that there'll be a point where they can't grow too far without it. I think that the study of the first draw, Iai, or Kenjutsu is integral. There's a story that Chiba was traveling with Sensei down to Osaka, and he was his Otomo attendant, traveling attendant, and Sensei dropped him off and said, "Here, you don't know anything about a sword. Here, go here, and here's this master's address. Go there," and dropped him off because he didn't have an understanding of the sword, and so he practiced.
Did you say what teacher that was?
I don't remember, but a little homework, I'm sure we could find it.
How long was he there for?
I have no idea. I just heard the story, so.
So, but then what does a modern person do if they don't have a competent sword teacher to learn from?
Well, I don't think you can learn any martial art without having a teacher's direction.
But YouTube is a great teacher. That's how I learned to change my oil on my car.
Yeah. Watching a video, you can get quite confused. So I remember when they first started doing videos, VHS videos, we videoed Toyota Sensei doing a variety of techniques. And so I had missed one of the seminars, and I asked someone from Orange County Aikikai or Nakayama Sensei to have a copy. And I went home and looked at the video. And then the next time I had Toyota Sensei here in my dojo doing a seminar, I went over with him what I had interpreted, what I saw in the video. And he shook his head and he said, "No, that's not right at all." So I learned at that point that you can become confused, more confused by a video than you can learn from it.
Well, and that's the state of Aikido today.
That's the state of everything today. Just go on YouTube, right?
I know this Aikido teacher, and I said, who would you consider your teacher? And he said, Christian Tissier. And I said, have you ever studied with him? No. I've watched his videos, though. And I said, but you consider that person your teacher. I mean, do you think that through your walks through your Aikido journey that not sticking with one teacher solely helped you or hurt you?
Well, it hurt me politically, but it helped me in many ways because
right?
Yeah, there's that. Yeah, and being dojo cho, by the way, is just all politics. So for all of you that want to own your own dojo,
yeah, if you want to start your own dojo, stand alone, better get good at politics.
yeah. But as far as my exposure, I think it had the fact that I did, make an effort to train with all the first generation Aikidoists from O Sensei, that it gave me a wider view of what the art was about, because you can, ask any Shihan or default to look at a video of any Shihan, and you'll see they may all do the technique slightly different.
How close was Don Jir's Aiki Jiu-Jitsu to Daito-ryu or modern Aikido?
Well, it was very close, and so that's interesting. So one of my trips to Japan, I've taken 8 or 9 trips to Japan specifically to train in Aikido, and some I mixed business because I was doing international business at the time. But I was staying at the Keio Plaza, which is in Shinjuku, and I was training at Hambu, and I went down to the concierge and I asked a very nice young lady, I said, I understand that there's a Daito-ryu master in Tokyo here, and I would like to go visit him. And she said, oh, come back in, dinner time. So I came back in the evening, and she gave me a whole dissertation that she had set up a private appointment with me to go meet Katsuyuki Kondo Sensei, who is the head of the Daito-ryu. So I went to his private dojo and was there. And so while I was there, his young attendant was a young Japanese-American man from, he was a young boy actually at the time, and he was from Gardena, California. And so he spoke perfect English, which accommodated me. And I was just sitting on the edge of the mat there, and Katsuyuki Kondo said, your friend's on the phone. Oh, I should preempt this by saying earlier in that day I went to the burial site of the 47 Ronin. Mm-hmm. So I was wearing one of those Yanagiru shirts that had the 47 Ronin on it. And so Kondo Sensei says, your friend's on the phone. I said, nobody knows I'm here. And he said, yeah, your friend's on the phone. So I pick it up, and it's Don Anje, and he's going, who's this? I said, it's my Gallo Sensei. Oh, you're a clothing student. Yes. He said, well, tell Kondo I want to come over this evening. And I said, okay, yeah. But they thought that was entertaining for them.
That sounds like, very coincidental.
Yeah, it was quite coincidental. But so the point being is Don Anje would actually come and train with him to answer your question. So he was getting the real thing. And his background, I don't know if anybody knows his background, but he trained with Yoshida Kuniharu. Was his master's father, Kenji Kuniharu, the Yanagiru. So for those who don't understand, Ryu is a family art. It's passed down through the family. These are samurai families. So if we go back to feudal Japan, 16th century or before, into the warring state period, 10% of the population were samurai, and they pretty much were a militaristic group of individuals who actually ran the country. And so the art was taught from childhood up. It wasn't you didn't decide one day I'm going to go to a dojo and learn to be, a Yanagiru master.
So then how did Don Jir become the soke of a Japanese art living in the United States?
Really interesting story. So here we go. He was from Ithaca, New York, and it was I believe, post-war, just post-Second World War. And he was a young man in his early teens, and he was walking through the park, and he saw a Japanese gentleman he'd never seen before, because obviously prior to that we had the incarceration of the innocent. But so he walked up to him, and I don't know, most of you probably don't remember this, but in the bazooka bubblegum days, on the back of bazooka bubblegum wrapper, it showed a jiu-jitsu technique. So he walked up to this man who he didn't know, only Japanese gentleman he'd ever seen, and he said, "Can you teach me that?" And his answer was, "I don't do that anymore." So he kept coming back and asking. He kept seeing him. This is the story Don told me, so I'm just transmitting the story. And it turns out that he was Kenji Kotaro, and Yoshida Kotaro was considered higher rank than Sokaka Takeda, as far as the Aikido Jiu-Jitsu world was concerned, the Ru. So eventually he took Don and he said, "We're going to go get a whole bunch of mattresses." They got a bunch of mattresses and they put them in this back room where Kenji Kotaro was living there in Ithaca, New York. And he started practicing. And I understand he practiced with him like somewhere between 4 and 5 years and learned the art. And then proceeded on his own. You have to, if you get to any high level in any art, there's a point where you have to go beyond what you're being taught by your teacher. There has to be a lot of introspection, a lot of examination of the art. I tell my students that third dan I started dissecting Aikido. And what I mean by that was, I remember, and again I was Q rank, high Q rank, I asked one of the dan ranks, I think it was Monty down at Aikikai San Diego. He was an FBI agent. But I asked him on the side, I said, "Why do we do this technique this way?" And his answer to me was, "Well, because Sensei does it that way." And that wasn't good enough for me. I wanted to know why the technique was done that way. How are, like we went over today, how are you stealing their balance? How are you doing the movement? Where does this all come from? So.
That's cool. So as you spent all this time studying with all these teachers, as the question was before, it's like, do you pick and choose? Do you teach this way on one day, this way on another? How does it come to be your Aikido now that you've been doing Aikido for this long?
Okay, so that's interesting. So when I shifted after Toyota Sensei, just before his death, I shifted to another Shihan, and that was Kubo Shihan, Robert Kubo from Hawaii. And again, a student of Yamada, I believe. No, very popular judo man, highest ranked judo man in the United States in the early 50s.
From the islands?
Yeah, he was from the islands.
Yukimitsu Yamamoto?
Yes. That's who he was.
Yukiso Yamamoto?
That's who. He was studying under him. I told you I'm a little fuzzy on names. So he studied with him, and he came back after serving in the Korean conflict, and he came back in the dojo, and he said to Kubo Shihan, "We don't do judo here anymore. We do Aikido." And so then he started studying Aikido.
Yeah.
And I started with Kubo Shihan in 2001. He came here and did a seminar, and so the reason I'm bringing this up is I asked him at one point, I said, "Should we do all our art just like you? And should I abandon everything I've learned?" And he looked at me in this little sing-songy Hawaiian pidgin English. He said, "No." He said, "You just blend it in." So, yeah. So I think all of our arts end up being a conglomeration of what we learned and how we fit it all in.
That's always like I asked Glenn Yoshida Sensei the same question because his father was a good friend and student of Yokiso Yamamoto.
Ah.
And when Yamamoto Sensei transferred everything to Aikido, Yoshida Sensei's father quit.
Interesting.
And I was like, because Yukishu Yamamoto at that time was, like you said, a very high-ranked judo practitioner. And so for him to, for lack of a better word, abandon ship and then go with Aikido, like that's a big deal. It's like somebody walking in here right now doing some stuff, and I'm like, I'm over there now.
Yeah.
And we as a dojo don't do that. So it's pretty spectacular when you think of how good Tohei Sensei was probably, or Yamamoto Sensei.
Well, so I was just going to interject that Tohei Sensei was the ambassador sent by O Sensei on what he called the Silver Bridge to Hawaii to spread the art. And this will be one time you can look at YouTube. Okay? Look at old footage of Tohei Sensei. There's no question he was amazing. He was above and beyond most, if not all, other Aikidoka at the time. Hence, that's why O Sensei made him 10th Dan and head of the Dojo Cho.
Yeah.
He had an ability, and I had the good fortune to train with him on a couple of occasions. He was elderly at the time, but there was still that spark. His chi was very impressive. So
yeah,
I think that's what probably, because he would go there, and he would literally go into bars and find the biggest, pardon the expression, moke, biggest Hawaiian he could, and take them on. And he had the ability to do it. By the way, he was only like 5'3".
Really?
Yeah, 5'3", 5'4". He's not a big man. He was about 165 or so. So he was very, well put together, built like a little fire plug.
Yeah, because the story goes, they had a demonstration and they invited any judo person to come up and try to resist a throw or something like that, and he threw them all. And then that's why they all left judo for Aikido.
I wouldn't doubt it. Yeah.
So you've been doing Aikido now close to 40 years.
Yes.
Martial arts, right?
Well, I've been martial arts 58 years.
58 years. You've attained these high ranks, 8th Dan in Daito-ryu, 6th Dan in Aikikai. What do you do to keep moving forward?
Well, I'm a student.
So what's the secret?
Well, I just keep trying to learn something new. I'm a student.
But is there something that you do that no one else does that you think is benign, like you eat all your cereal with your left hand and then do all your writing with your right, as a conscious effort to gain a 1-inch advantage on the day?
So my first mentor and sensei in Aikido was Gerald Gimel Sensei, and he was this salty old Marine, and he tried to recruit constantly from Camp Pendleton. So I was the only student that stuck with him, me and a young man who was wasn't even a Marine, he was a Navy corpsman. So we stuck with him, and on the first day that I went to train with him, he said, I'm going to give you some advice. You just come to Aikido. I said, what do you mean? He said, you just come. Doesn't matter if you just got, because I was a construction guy at the time. I owned a construction business. So, after 10 hours of construction, the thought of going to do 2 or 3 hours of Aikido was not exactly on the top of my list. But he made it real clear to me. He said, you just come and you'll get the energy once you get on the mat. So the secret is just come and practice. Well, so I have recently published this, and it's on Amazon as an e-published book, and it's in English in paperback and EPUB. It's also on Amazon in French, Italian, Spanish, German, and it will be on shortly in Ukrainian and Russian. So I've had it translated into all those languages. Its title is Aikido, A Practitioner's Guide. So what it is, in fact, is a actual guide of how to do Aikido. But it includes a basis for doing a class, starting with what you folks experience today, starting with a stretch. That stretch was the same stretch as Koichi Tohei used to do in his dojos. I've also seen that stretch done in other martial art dojos in Japan. It's just a very traditional head-to-toe stretch, so everything's stretched out. And at one point, because of the proximity of this dojo to Camp Pendleton, this was a Marine Corps fight club. I had nothing but young Marines in here, and they all wanted to get at it. So they'd always say, Sensei, why are we doing this stretch? I don't want to stretch. I don't want to do that Aiki Taiso stuff. We were wasting our time. So I said, okay, so I let them do their thing, right? Boy, the injury level went up.
By not stretching.
By not stretching and not doing body warm-up. And so the book basically encompasses what you would teach as an instructor or what you would practice as a student. That's why I call it a practitioner's guide. So either you're an instructor or a student, you can use it as a basis for teaching. You can use it as a basis for your own training. I'm going to follow that up with Kodona, which is advanced. So I'm going to start, that should be out in December. I'm going to teach advanced technique like we did today, some of the how to do Kaishiwaza, how to teach Kaishiwaza. So Kaishiwaza wasn't even, I'm sure you guys probably remember this, it wasn't really even introduced in the United States until the 90s, early 90s. Prior to that, we just did Aikido, and every other throw that you couldn't put a name to was Kokionage. It's Kokionage, that's a Kokionage. Everything was a Kokionage. Yeah.
So what was the impetus behind writing this book?
Well, I wanted to share, because of my path, both Ki Society and Aikikai, I wanted to share with people that it should blend. So we had this conversation earlier about what our senseis would tell us to do and not do. And one of the things that was made real clear was that you don't go and train with them. You know what I'm talking about, right? So when USAF, Chiba Sensei would run a seminar, that same weekend, Toyota Sensei would be Southern California. And they'd always tell us, don't go train with them. And I asked Chiba Sensei, why is that? I mean, here, this is the art of peace. We're supposed to be harmonizing. You're all top-level Aikidoka, and you don't want to even train with each other. And his comeback to me was, well, my students will migrate. So they were concerned about losing students.
Do you believe that?
No. I think your students are going to stay with you because they have faith that you're teaching them the true art, or at least the art they want to learn. But if they're going to go, they're going to go, True. You can't chase students. Years and years ago, my partner told me, he said, a student would leave. You'd think they were, extremely athletic. They should be here, They're going to be their easy path to Shodan. Boy, I should keep them here. Call them up, and they'd always have a reason. They'd come back one or two times, gone. So he said, don't chase students. If they're committed, they're committed. You're not going to change their mind.
I guess we should close out. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like or subscribe to this podcast. Thank you.
Thank you, Sensei.